So how can we fully let go? Like
Hmm.
when we know, I feel like there's a lot of spiritual enthusiasts that listen to this podcast. There's definitely some newbies, but we're pretty well versed. And
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of us are stuck sometimes in this insatiable cycle of healing.
Hmm.
And I feel like for me, my body typically knows, but we have this addiction to healing sometimes, or this addiction to this darkness. Like, how can we let go?
I totally agree with you. I think that we are so addicted to labeling things that then it's I'm a star seed, I'm a this, I'm a that, he's a narcissist, I'm an empath. When it's really helpful to have language that helps us expand and understand each other, but language is so limiting because you can be two things at once. And I think that people get really hung up on believing just one thing about themselves and then they get addicted to the process or they get addicted to checking things off their list. If I did my morning meditations and my affirmations and all these things, it makes them feel like they're getting their gold stars, which again is the addiction of productivity. So my biggest thing is play. It is
Mhm.
literally let your inner child out. Because I have so many people I teach Reiki and they're saying, I don't want to mess this up. And how do I do it? And I go, okay, just take a breath, go dance, go channel the Reiki while you're dancing in a field to music. And you will feel it so much more than if you're sitting there with a list of 10 steps of, okay, one, two, three, four, because you're so
Mhm.
in your head. And we
Yeah.
need to get you into your soul. I think that we have a world that's so disconnected from their inner child, and the inner child is the creator. They are the muse. So the more that you let them out and the more that they feel safe to be seen, the more creative you'll be, the more energy you'll have, the more love you'll have, the more joy. It's really just getting back to the innocence that was lost within all of us somewhere along the way.
And that's when like the downloads drop in. I always say this to my husband, who's a grounded earth Taurus. And I'm just like, the idea isn't going to come actually when you're behind the screen. Like it's going to come when you're in nature, when you're doing something creative, or like for him, it's like playing basketball. I feel, and that's what the artist date is. It's like finding what works for you. Have you been doing the weekly artist dates? Or is
Yeah,
it?
it's funny. Yeah, I am, but I also just feel like my life's an artist date. Like I'm alone a lot and I'm constantly like trying new restaurants and just like taking myself wherever I want. So it's funny,
Mhm.
but I'm doing it with two neighbors and so I am forcing myself because they're like you have to do it right. I'm like, okay. But yeah, I do really feel like I've gotten to this point after 8 years where I live a life of creativity. Like it is, I like bathe in it in every moment in how I dress and how I just like decorate my homes and how I set up my Canva. And just really, I try to live the work
Mm.
because embodiment really becomes the next step. After you have it all here, you want to actually live it. And not to say that there's not ups and downs, but really just becoming what I teach other people because the clearer I am about myself, the clearer reflection I can be for anyone I work with for them to realize who they really are.
So what do you do when you have a bad day?
So for me, I'm obsessed with movies. So I pretty much I have the ability to usually clear my day, which is a huge blessing. And so
Mm.
for me, I usually turn off my phone, I go to the movies, I take my inner child, I get a kids pack, I eat my snacks, I see my movie, and I would say most times by the end I feel better because I love story so much. And just
Mm.
like we were saying with play, if I'm able to, I feel like for me movies really are able to get my mind off of whatever it is. So when I let my inner child have her popcorn and her Coke and her candy and just sit there and just lose myself in my imagination, typically by the end of it, I feel better. And then if I don't, I'll call a friend. Getting outside also really helps. So I'll go on a nature walk.
Mhm.
And sometimes I just allow myself to go to bed really early because typically one night's sleep, I'll be better the next day. And I try to just be really gentle because I used to be very much a perfectionist. And if I had an off day, I would just be so mad at myself. And so
Mm.
I try to think if I was a little kid and I had a stomach ache or I didn't feel well, how would I want to be treated? And so I
Mm.
try to be really gentle with myself in that way and just love myself extra and not be judgmental and just be kind. But movie and a snack pack usually help me most times.
I love that. We've actually, now that we're back in the city, Brandon and I, we tried to do this before and it didn't really work out. We would always pencil in on Tuesday afternoon, or something like that. Midweek, the Angelica Theater in New York City does like
Mm.
$5 movies or whatever. And this is like gorgeous, like theater. And we're like, okay, we're going to go on like a Tuesday, like afternoon or something, like blackout time. And we'll just shift things around. We never ended up making it work. But we're like recommitting to it now. Cause pardon?
This is your sign.
I know this is my sign, but it just reignited that because I feel like movies really do transport me as well. But I feel like I was taught, a spiritual healer once told me that it was like such a low vibrational, just like activity. It's like you're not actually conscious. And I'm like, no, but our soul needs to indulge in these types of things. It just depends on the intention, right? If we're indulging in a quote unquote unhealthy food, it actually is in the intention and the energy behind it. And are you craving it and you're seeking it and it comes from a place of rigidity, or is that actually coming from a place that it is going to be soul filling for you and it's nourishing that inner child?
Yeah, and I think everything in moderation too. Laying in bed maybe for 10 hours, binge eating food and, watching TV is like, that's going to affect your next day, which is different. But I think, like you said, if you have the intention of, hey, I'm taking Tiny T out and like she's going to eat what she wants and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I feel like a lot of us women have had things around food. And so the more we can give ourselves leeway to that. And also, I think, again, like you can meditate in any way. I think that story is the reason I'm writing a novel is because I believe that story is the most profound way to teach. I believe I've read so many self-help books. The Alchemist just sticks with me most because it's a story. It is a
Yeah.
story with characters, right? And so I'm just such a believer that story is the oldest form of giving and relaying information. So I think also it's like I like to try to watch not like horror and stuff like that, but it's really just about doing something that makes you feel safe. I'm traveling a lot of the time where I don't have a lot of things that make me feel grounded or people around me. There's a movie theater everywhere. So whenever I'm in a new place and I'm feeling a little bit frazzled, I'm like, okay, just go see a movie because that is going to feel like home. So whatever home is to you, no one else can dictate if that's good or bad, if it's something that makes you feel safe.
I love that. I read a quote recently that was like, your body's an altar and it's, you have to feel safe within it and around you too, in order to like really rise into those upper chakras, which I feel like we didn't even get into the whole chakra conversation. I feel like it was actually really interesting when I did that reading with you because everyone was blocked. How does that manifest? How do you feel into that? What does that feel like for you when you know when someone's chakra?
So I typically measure it with a pendulum. Like I will say, I'll speak to your chakra and then I'll hang my pendulum and I'll see if it's blocked or if it's spinning. And it's really typically pretty easy to get them back into alignment, but they just switch in and out a lot. So the goal is to keep realigning it until having it be balanced becomes the norm instead of having it be displaced because they're always moving, but we're all so used to the fragmented chaos. So
Mm.
my goal is to bring it back into alignment and then talk to your subconscious of this is your natural state of being. Remember this moment so that you, next time you're feeling frazzled, can take a deep breath and say, take me back to that moment. And really empowering people to realize you don't always need a healer. Your intention and your belief is so strong. And if you felt something once, it's so much easier to recreate it. So
Yes.
that's why I love working with someone. It's let me show you how good you can feel so that you can remember it moving forward.
Yeah, scientifically, it's your reticular activating system, I believe. And it's once you feel something, that's like at the core of manifestation. It's once you feel the feeling of like your soul blueprint, as in like your purest, fullest, most authentic expression, you bookmark that. And then it's like when you meet someone or you do something and it aligns with that frequency, it's like a check for you. And that takes a lifetime to figure out. But that's so fascinating. I haven't had a pendulum in years, but that's how I used to do it as well. But I was just curious because it was a
Yeah.
really impactful session. Okay, I have so many more questions, but we have to head to face off because we're running out of time. But actually, first, one more question. What inspired you to write this? Waking up an ode to alchemy.
So it's really interesting. I was writing the poetry during COVID with no plans to make it a book. And at the time, I had written and produced a pilot that I was shopping around town to all the major networks. And so I had a psychic session, asked her, when is the show going to get picked up? And she said, you're writing this book. And I was like, I've never written a book. No, I'm not. She's, you're writing this book. And I was like, oh, this is a waste of money. And sure enough, I went home to write in my journal and it fell open and said Book of Poems by TF. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the book that she was talking about. And
Wow.
so, without much thought, I just put them together. I self published a first edition of this book called Brown Eyed Girl. And the second it went live, I was panicked because I never wrote those poems for anyone to read them. And
Mm.
funny enough, I was smoking a cigarette on the cover, very old Hollywood glam. And so I wasn't able to market the book at all. And it was devastating. And I 3 years later decided to do the Audible book with a musician for vinyl. And so we sat together for months, created this album and did this book. And I was like, oh, I might as well republish it. And 3 years later, I had changed so much. So I changed the title. Same poems, but a completely different book. It was structured differently. It was based on alchemy. So yeah, I just was like, I might as well put it on Spotify if we're already going to do the vinyl in the book. And it just became this really beautiful ode to alchemy because it's something that I really think I'm very strong in. And it's
Mm.
something that I can take almost any situation that someone shows me and I can show them how it's actually something that's a huge blessing. So it's just been this massive thing in my life. And I plan to make more. I'm working on another one right now next to the novel. And so it's just exciting to see what kind of people keep throwing me. Because again, that wasn't something I wanted to do, but I was called to do it. And so I always listen.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful synthesis of music, poetry. It's like all of these arts. Your creative spirit really shines through. And congrats on this submission for Best Spoken Word Poetry Grammy nomination. Casual. Like,
Thank you. Yeah. We find out on November 8th if it gets an actual nomination, but just to be on the ballot, it's very surreal and not something I ever planned for myself since I'm not a musician. And I'm just super grateful the musician on it. We made every single piece of music custom together for each poem. There's 74. So that's so many different tunes. And I am so obsessed and in love with the album. And I think it's because I collaborated. It's something that I got to see someone else really shine and sparkle and also have so much impact and input. And I'd never worked with music. So it was juicy and new. And I'm really proud of it.
oh my gosh, you are so inspiring. I feel like I need to go paint or go to a pottery class after this because that's like the juice that so many of us are missing on our journeys. And that can just spark and transcend into so many different things, our career, our relationships, and beyond. So thank you for all the work that you put out into the world and best of luck with the submission. Fingers crossed. I think our podcast is coming out on 11/8, so everyone has to go and check
See?
Talyn's nominee out, submission out.